We have a debate in our society, probably since the Enlightenment, about whether the phenomenon of meaning is real in any real sense. And it tends to be downplayed by empiricists because it's not objective. But it seems to me highly probable that the sense of meaning, most fundamentally, is a signal of the operation of the optimization of this process. Is that right? Is that we want to put ourselves on the edge where things are predictable enough so that we get what we need and want, but so that at the same time we're expanding our adaptive competence in a variety of domains simultaneously.
Exactly.
Right? And I think meaning, so here's a way of thinking about this existentially. So imagine that you're pursuing a given goal, whatever it is. Maybe you want to get married, you want to have children, and then you think, well, who the hell cares in 100,000 years? What difference is it going to make anyways? And then all your motivational energy is drained out by that sort of nihilistic thought. Now, one thing you can think in relationship to that is, well, that nihilistic thought is accurate because that's a superordinate time frame, and if you had any sense, that's the time frame across which you would evaluate things, and you just have to pay the price of the meaninglessness of your life. Or you could say, well, wait a second, if I'm pursuing a goal and I use a frame of interpretation that renders it amotivational, one possibility is that I'm using a counterproductive frame of reference, and that's actually what my nervous system is signaling to me. So one of the discussions we could have is like, is it reasonable epistemologically and even ontologically to use your sense of deep meaning as a guide to optimal functioning in the world? Like, I think it's the instinct that is literally that guide.
So I think there's like 17 things I want to say. That's really powerful. First thing, I think Thomas Nagel is right. Nihilism is not generated by argument because the arguments are actually technically not valid. So if someone says, well, 100,000 years from now won't matter, it's symmetrical. What's happening 100,000 years from now doesn't matter to you.
Right.
It has no normative demand.
Right. Why is that? Why is that a relevant fact?
Exactly.
Yes. Because you're making an implicit presumption that the wider time frame is the
exactly. So that's the first point, right? And so for him, and I agree with him, it's not a matter of a propositional argument. It's a matter of you haven't learned how to properly integrate your different perspectives. Your immediate first-person perspective, the cosmic, and this is what I think things like 4E cognitive science and Neoplatonism are about. How do we properly cultivate the virtues for managing and improving the relationship between our perspectives?
Yes, that's the Jacob's ladder problem.
Yes. So that second thing is, and this goes towards, and this is something you and I have both talked in common, and we have in common, we've talked a lot about, and I was privileged to work with John Kennedy, is the notion of, real relationship. Gibson's notion of affordance is a crucial one, right? It's that, no, let's go to, biology and adaptivity. Is adaptivity in the organism? Of course not. That doesn't make any sense. Is the great white shark adaptive? Well, not if you put it in the Sahara Desert. It dies. Like, is the adaptivity in the environment? Well, that doesn't make any. It's a real relationship between. It's the way they're really coupled. And there are real couplings that make a real difference, right? And so we have to get away from we have to get away from that Cartesian exhaustive. The problem with the Cartesian exhaustive divide is it gives you nothing that relates the subjective to the objective, which means truth is not possible.
Well, it also means that meaning evaporates in some real sense, because it's reduced to the subjective, and then that's reduced to the arbitrary, and then that just disintegrates. And that doesn't work because, well, I don't think it works biologically either, because meaning does appear to me to be something akin to a profound instinct. And even from an objective perspective, you have to make the supposition that an actual biological instinct is real. And so the idea of the object eats itself in that regard, in some fundamental sense. This is kind of the argument that I always tried to have with Sam Harris. It's like there's a contradiction between the Darwinian notion of reality and the Newtonian or Cartesian idea of reality. Because there's a reality that has something to do with this notion of fit, right? Of relationship between the subjective and the objective.
Right, and the Newtonian and the Cartesian are formal systems. Darwin's theory of evolution is the first significant and important dynamical systems theory within science, in which the self-organization of the system and its coupling to the world are constitutive of the kind of entity it is.
Right, including as entities of categorization and perception.
Yes. Now, let's go back to the adaptivity and the self-organizing. So the self-organizing criticality, think about what it's doing. Think about how it is Darwinian. right? So you get the avalanche that introduces variation, and then you get the compression that selects from it, and then a new variation, so what the brain is doing Mike, is it's implementing the same grammar by which biological evolution across species are fitting them to the environment. Your brain is doing this self-organizing criticality that is constantly evolving your adaptive, your cognitive adaptive fit to the environment.
Okay, so that's also why, just to point out to everyone, that's actually also why zero-sum economic models are false, is because the zero-sum economic model presumes a fixed reality in relationship to affordances. And there is no fixed reality, and the way that we've superseded the limits to growth in perhaps not an absolute sense, but in some very important sense, is that we do have this capacity. I think it was Alfred North Whitehead said that we can let our ideas and concepts die instead of us. Right, and so we can, you might say, well, it's a zero-sum game, economically speaking. There's only so much that you and I can share. But there's an implicit part of that argument, which is, well, given the manner in which we've structured our relationships and the environment, that might be true. But then it's an open question. How much restructuring of those a priori axioms can we do? And the answer is, well, an indefinite amount. We're unbelievably good at that, and we can do more with less all the time.
So I agree with that, and that, I mean, because we can take it up into levels of symbolic abstraction. Well, you know this. You put person in the thing, and I'll give you $5. Will you take it? Of course. Now you put them in this situation. I'll give you $5 and I give you $10, but you only get to keep your 5 if you let him keep his 10. Most people, I don't want it. Even though they could get the $5, they don't want to belong to the system that is right. So they move up a level of abstraction.
They don't want to participate in what they see as perceived unfairness. And that's, I think, because they're playing a metagame in that situation, right?
And what I was going to say is, like, the degree to which we can abstract the meta games we're playing in. I don't know of any formal argument that says it stops at this level. To go towards your point. Now, bring it back one more thing around. So the brain is evolving. And I think this has a lot. This is what basically is going on in relevance realization. You can see it in your attention. You know, default mode and task center. Default is making you mind wander, and you introduce variation, and then task focus selects, and then you vary. You kill off most of the variations, but some of them come in because you mind wandered enough. You can do this. Stephen and Dixon, you give people a problem, like an insight problem, and they're impassing, they can't solve it. And you just introduce a little bit of entropy into the system. Like you put some static on the computer screen or you shake it, and then they'll have the insight because it puts in enough criticality.
Right, so they stop this unidimensional task-focused attention, and it allows the spread of activation.
Right, and then they reselect and they evolve a new way of framing the problem. You get the ongoing evolution.
Well, so that would mean in some sense, okay, so imagine that you snap out of goal-focused attention. This reminds me of the psychoanalytic idea. So Freud would put his clients into a state of free association, right? And so Freud's tack was try just to say whatever comes into your mind or describe your fantasies and just let yourself talk, right? No self-censorship. And so really what he meant by that was abandon any instrumental goal-focused attention for the moment and let your mind wander. Jung did a lot of this too, because he did a lot of purposeful fantasizing, right? He just let his... That's a contradiction in terms. He let his mind wander. He would have discussions with the characters of his imagination, for example. It's very hallucinogenic in some real sense. But you can imagine that, there's a hierarchy of goals. And you move from a unity at the top of the hierarchy to a plurality. At any given moment when you're focusing your attention, you're using the center focus of your attention as the main source of unity, and that's reducing everything to an a priori set of perceptions and principles. But then you let that go. Well, now you have these diverse networks in your brain that they all have a slightly different way of looking at the same situation. And you can let them have an internal dialogue, essentially. And some of those, one of the things the psychoanalysts pointed out is some of those can be id-like. So imagine, for example, that you're angry at someone. And so you allow yourself to notice the fantasies that you're generating as a consequence of the anger, right? And you'll see maybe you have a very violent fantasy and something that's highly aggressive. Well, you're being informed that part of your category system has that vengefulness, say, as a goal, and that actually might be relevant in some sense if you can figure out how to integrate that id-related goal to a higher set of principles, right? You don't want to produce absolute bloody mayhem because that doesn't iterate well across instances, but that doesn't mean you should ignore the input of these subsidiary systems.